The night they tried to humiliate me was the same night they lost their power over me forever. I still remember the way the room went quiet when I stood up. Not because they respected me, not because they expected anything good from me, but because every person in that room had spent years calling me unstable, dramatic, difficult, and dangerous. They smiled when I walked in, but those were the kind of smiles that only happen when people are waiting to watch you fall. My name is Claire, and for most of my life, my family did not see me as a daughter, a sister, or even a human being with feelings. They saw me as a problem, the one who caused tension, the one who always misunderstood things, the one who needed help, the one who, according to them, could never just be normal. And the worst part, I started believing them. Not fully, not deep inside, but enough to doubt myself, enough to stay quiet, enough to let lies grow in the dark while I kept telling myself that maybe, just maybe, if I was patient, they would finally see the truth. They never did. So instead of arguing, I started collecting. Not revenge, not drama, evidence. Every message, every email, every date, every voice memo, every financial record. Every lie they told when they thought I was too broken to remember. I kept it all, quietly, carefully. While they laughed at me behind my back, I built a wall out of facts. And on the night of the family event they had chosen to publicly break me, I brought the whole wall with me. Let me take you back. Because to understand that night, you need to understand what it cost me to get there. I grew up in a house where love had conditions. It was never spoken out loud, but it was there in everything. If I agreed with them, I was sweet. If I questioned anything, I was too sensitive. If I cried, I was manipulating. If I got quiet, they said I was cold. There was no version of me that was simply allowed to exist. My older brother, Eric, was the golden child. My younger sister, Megan, was the pretty one, the easy one, the one everyone felt sorry for. And me? I was the one who noticed too much. I was the one who asked why bills were missing, why people's stories kept changing, why my mother's tone changed the moment relatives were around, why my father always looked at me like I had already disappointed him before I even spoke. From a young age, I learned that truth was dangerous in my house. If I pointed out something wrong, I became the problem. If I stayed silent, they used my silence as proof that I was unstable. It was like being trapped in a room where every door led to blame. By the time I was in my 20s, I had become the family target. They joked about me in front of guests. She's just going through a phase. She's always been a little off. Claire means well, but she exaggerates. They said these things with a laugh, as if they were harmless. But words like that do not stay harmless forever. They sink into you. They follow you into every room. They live in your head when everyone else goes to sleep. I started second-guessing everything. Did I really remember that conversation correctly? Did I really see what I thought I saw? Was I being too emotional? Too suspicious? Too much? That is what they wanted. Not just to silence me, to make me doubt my own mind. And once they got that far, they could do anything. The lies started small. My brother borrowed money and never paid it back, then told everyone I had offered it as a gift and changed my mind. My sister used my name on a family account and said I had volunteered to help. My mother told relatives I was struggling mentally and not dependable. My father repeated it like it was fact. Then, one day, I learned something that changed everything. I found an email chain. At first, it looked normal. Just family messages, planning, talking about a gathering, but one line caught my eye. One line from my mother to my father. She wrote, "Make sure Claire doesn't bring up the house issue. We need her to look unstable if she starts anything." I read it 3 times, then 4. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. Not because I was shocked they lied. I was shocked by how planned it was. They were not reacting to me. They were preparing for me. That was the moment something inside me went cold. Not dead. Cold. Clear. I realized then that if I kept speaking impulsively, they would keep twisting my words. If I cried, they would call me emotional. If I got angry, they would call me unstable. If I begged them to stop, they would call it proof that I was losing control. So I stopped trying to win arguments, and I started building a case. I saved screenshots. I downloaded emails. I kept copies of bank statements. I recorded every conversation where they admitted something, even by accident. I stored everything in 3 different places. A hidden folder, a flash drive, and a cloud backup no one knew about. For months, I said almost nothing. They thought I was giving up. In reality, I was getting ready. The big family event was supposed to be my mother's 75th birthday dinner. A huge celebration. Cousins flying in, aunts and uncles arriving, neighbors, old friends. Everyone was going to be there. The entire family stage. The perfect setting for public humiliation. I should have known something was wrong when my sister called me that morning with that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "Claire, you are coming tonight, right?" I paused. "Of course I'm coming." She laughed lightly. "Good. We'd hate for people to think you're avoiding the family." There it was. The warning. The threat hidden inside the smile. I should have hung up right then. Instead, I said, "Wouldn't want that." She didn't notice the edge in my voice. Or maybe she did, and simply didn't care. When I arrived that evening, the house looked beautiful. Warm lights, white flowers, soft music. Everything polished for guests, everything pretending to be perfect. My mother hugged people like she was the picture of grace. My father shook hands and smiled like a man who had never wounded anyone in his life. My brother stood near the bar with his usual confidence, telling a story too loudly so people would notice him. My sister floated from group to group in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And then there was me, standing in the doorway with a black folder under my arm and a flash drive in my purse. They noticed me right away. My mother's smile tightened for half a second before she recovered. "Claire," she said, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. "You came." That tone. Not happy. Not loving. Just surprised I had shown up to be managed. I smiled back. I said I would." My father gave me the look I had known my entire life. The one that meant, "Don't make this difficult." I gave him the look back that meant, "You have no idea what difficult looks like." For the first hour, I stayed quiet. I listened. I watched. I let them think they still had the advantage. And then the dinner started. The tables were full. Wine glasses clinked. People sat under the glow of chandeliers, laughing over food and old stories. My mother stood up to give a toast. She held her glass high and smiled at everyone. "Family is everything," she said. "And in difficult times, we lean on the people we trust most." The room murmured in agreement. Then she looked directly at me. Some people in life struggle to understand that. A few people laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. Just enough to sting. She continued. But with patience, love, and support, even the most troubled hearts can find peace. Troubled hearts. That was her way of calling me mentally unstable, without saying it directly. I kept my face calm. I didn't move. I didn't react. That seemed to annoy her. My brother raised his glass and said, "To family, and to knowing who can be counted on." More laughter. My sister added, "And to people who don't create drama when everyone is trying to enjoy a nice evening." There it was. The setup. The whole room was starting to turn. I could feel it. That invisible shift where everybody starts looking at one person like they already know the ending. My aunt smiled politely at me, but her eyes were curious. My cousin looked uncomfortable. A few relatives avoided my gaze, and my mother, now standing beside the head of the table, said, "Actually, this is the perfect time." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what was coming. She held up her phone and said, "There's been some confusion lately in the family, and I think it's healthy to be honest in front of everyone." I looked at her. She looked back at me with that small, cruel smile. "My daughter Claire," she said, "has been under a great deal of stress. It's made her imagine things. It's made her accuse family members of behavior that simply is not true." My chest burned. I could hear my own heartbeat. She kept going. "She has sent messages that are upsetting and frankly concerning. We have all tried to support her, but at some point, we have to be honest about what is happening." I slowly set my glass down. She was building her performance beautifully. Every word was chosen. Every sentence was designed to make me look unstable before I even spoke. Then my brother stood up. He looked directly at the room and shook his head. "We've all tried to help Claire," he said, "but you can only do so much for someone who refuses to admit when they need help." A few people frowned. A few nodded. That was the part that hurts the most. Not the people who attack you. The people who quietly agree because it is easier than asking questions. My sister folded her hands with fake concern. "She's been saying things about money, about the house, about private family matters. We're worried she's building stories in her head." My mother sighed. "It breaks my heart," she said, "but we've reached a point where we have to protect the family from her behavior." Protect the family from me. That was the sentence. That was what they wanted everyone to remember. Not the truth. Just the label. The unstable one. The difficult one. The one nobody should believe. A silence spread through the room. I could see the confusion on some faces. The discomfort. The polite waiting to see what I would do. And that was the moment they expected me to crack. To cry. To yell, to defend myself with words they could tear apart. Instead, I looked at my mother and said, very calmly, "You should finish your speech." She blinked. That was not the reaction she wanted. My father frowned. "Claire, don't make a scene." I turned to him. "You're right," I said. "Let's not make a scene." Then I walked to the table, slowly. Quietly. No dramatic movement. No shaking hands. No tears. Just me, carrying my black folder. People started looking at one another. My brother's smile disappeared. My sister's eyes narrowed. My mother still believed she had control. She said, "Claire, sit down. This is not the time." I opened the folder. It actually is. And then I pulled out the first stack of papers. The room changed immediately. I saw it in their faces first. Confusion, fear, recognition. My mother's expression went stiff. "What is that?" I looked at her. "Emails," I said. "Messages, bank records, notes, copies." My brother laughed nervously. "Oh, come on." I ignored him. I took out the printed email she had sent to my father. The one about making me look unstable. I held it up. "This was sent 3 months ago," I said, "before I ever confronted anyone." A murmur moved through the room. My mother's face drained. My father leaned forward. I went on. "You told everyone I was imagining things. You said I was confused. You said I needed help." I held up another page. "This is the message where you discussed how to present me at family gatherings so I would sound unreliable if I spoke up." No one was smiling now. The air had changed. You could feel the tension in every corner of the room. My sister stood abruptly. "That's taken out of context." I looked at her. "Is it?" Then I turned another page. This is the bank transfer showing my name used on an account I never approved. My brother's jaw clenched. This is a text from you, I said, looking at him now. Admitting you took the money and planned to say I offered it as a gift. He said, nothing. I pulled out another printout. And this is your message to Mom, telling her I was too unstable to challenge if we stayed calm and kept repeating the same story. The room was dead silent. My aunt's hand covered her mouth. My cousin stared at the table. A neighbor whispered, "Oh my God." I could feel every eye on me. But for the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I felt clear. My mother finally found her voice. Those are private family conversations. I nodded. Yes, they are. She blinked, almost offended that I had agreed with her. Then I said, private does not mean innocent. That landed harder than anything else. My father stood up. Claire, sit down and stop this right now. I turned to him. No. That one word hit the room like a slap. He had never heard it from me like that. Not in public. Not with an audience. Not without fear behind it. I looked directly at him and continued. For years, you all told people I was the problem. You told them I was unstable, dramatic, difficult, and jealous. You did that because it was easier than admitting what you were doing. My mother snapped, "You are twisting everything." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Then I tapped play. The recording came through the speakers loud and clear. My brother's voice. Just keep telling people Claire is emotional. Nobody will trust her word over ours. Then my sister's voice. If she starts asking about the house, say she's spiraling again. Then my mother. She won't fight hard if everyone thinks she's unstable. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds of total silence. It was like the whole room forgot how to breathe. My mother looked like she had been struck. My brother stared at the floor. My sister's face went pale. My father looked between them, then at me. And for the first time, I saw something I had almost never seen in him. Fear. Real fear. Because the performance was over. The mask had fallen, and there was nowhere left to hide. I raised my voice only slightly. Not loud, just enough. I know what you did to me. I know how long you planned it. I know how many people you lied to, and I know exactly why. Nobody moved. I continued. You wanted me to look unstable because if I looked unstable, then nobody would ask why things disappeared. Nobody would ask why my signature was used. Nobody would ask why the house documents changed hands. Nobody would ask why I was being erased. My mother tried to interrupt me, but I lifted my hand. No, you do not get to interrupt me now. I had never spoken to her like that in my life. The entire room was watching, and I could tell, from the way people shifted in their seats, that they understood this was bigger than a family argument. This was a fraud, Ali, a long, deliberate campaign to destroy one person's credibility so the truth would never come out. I turned to the guests. I'm not here to embarrass my family, I said. I'm here because they already embarrassed themselves when they decided lying was safer than honesty. A few people lowered their eyes. I could tell some of them had suspected something. Maybe not the full truth. But enough. Enough to feel guilty for never asking. Enough to realize they had laughed at the wrong person. I opened the folder wider and kept going. These are the dates. These are the records. These are the signatures. These are the transfers. These are the messages where they coordinated what to say when I asked questions. I looked at my mother again. You told everyone I was unwell, because you needed a reason for me to stop being believable. My voice shook a little then, not because I was losing control, because the pain finally had a place to go. And it worked, I said softly. For a long time, it worked. That was the saddest part. Not the anger, the grief, because it had worked. They had convinced people. They had convinced relatives. They had convinced me to for a while. I swallowed hard and went on. I started wondering if maybe I really was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. I wondered if maybe I was the one creating problems. My eyes burned, but I kept going. But I wasn't. I was reacting to lies. No one spoke. My brother finally stood up. "This is insane," he said weakly. "She's putting together random pieces and making a story." I looked right at him. "No, Eric. I put together everything you thought I would never keep." That shut him up. Then I picked up the last set of papers. "This," I said, "is the proof that the house was never yours to control." The room changed again. This was the real blow. Not the gossip. Not the lies. The property documents. The ownership records. The original filings. The legal trail. My father took a step toward me. "What are you talking about?" I looked at him. "The house was legally transferred to me years ago." A gasp moved through the room. My mother actually whispered. "No." I nodded. "Yes." She shook her head. "That's impossible." I held up the documents. "It's not impossible. It's documented." My sister froze. My brother's mouth opened, then closed. My father's face darkened. "I never signed that." I stared at him. "You didn't need to." He frowned. Then I said the words that made the whole room go still. "Because you trusted the wrong person to handle it. And when you did, I was the only one who kept the original paperwork." My mother looked like she might faint. I took a breath and let them feel the truth of it. "That is why you all kept pushing the story that I was unstable. Because you knew if I ever showed the documents, people would realize who had been lying." Now the silence was different, no longer polite, no longer curious. It was the silence of people realizing they had been standing next to a fire for years without noticing the smoke. My aunt spoke first, quietly. "Claire, is this true?" I looked at her. "Yes." She glanced at my mother, then at the papers again, then back at me. And in that small moment, I saw something I'd been starving for my whole life. Belief. Not from everyone, but enough. Enough to break the spell. One by one, more faces changed. Confusion became shock. Shock became anger. Anger became shame. My cousin whispered, "They said she was making everything up." My neighbor muttered, "Jesus." One of my uncles stood and said, "Then explain the documents." No one answered him. Because they couldn't. My mother looked around the room like the walls themselves had betrayed her. "Clara's being emotional," she said, but her voice was weaker now. I almost laughed. It was such a tired lie. So old. So useless. I looked at her and said, "No. For once, I'm being precise." Then I pulled out one last item. A thick envelope. I placed it on the table. Inside that envelope is a copy of everything sent to my lawyer. That got everyone's attention. My father stared at me. "You went to a lawyer?" My brother snapped. "You can't do that without telling us." I looked at him. "That's interesting. You had no problem doing things without telling me." The room went quiet again. Then I said, "I didn't come here to beg. I came here to end this." About the house. About private family matters. We're worried she's building stories in her head. My mother sighed. "It breaks my heart," she said. "But we've reached a point where we have to protect the family from her behavior. Protect the family from me." That was the sentence. That was what they wanted everyone to remember. Not the truth. Just the label. The unstable one. The difficult one. The one nobody should believe. A silence spread through the room. I could see the confusion on some faces. The discomfort. The polite waiting to see what I would do. And that was the moment they expected me to crack. To cry. To yell. To defend myself with words they could tear apart. Instead, I looked at my mother and said, very calmly, You should finish your speech. She blinked. That was not the reaction she wanted. My father frowned. Claire, don't make a scene. I turned to him. You're right, I said. Let's not make a scene. Then I walked to the table. Slowly, quietly. No dramatic movement. No shaking hands. No tears. Just me, carrying my black folder. People started looking at one another. My brother's smile disappeared. My sister's eyes narrowed. My mother still believed she had control. She said, Claire, sit down. This is not the time. I opened the folder. It actually is. And then I pulled out the first stack of papers. The room changed immediately. I saw it in their faces first. Confusion, fear, recognition. My mother's expression went stiff. What is that? I looked at her. Emails, I said. Messages, bank records, notes, copies. My brother laughed nervously. Oh, come on. I ignored him. I took out the printed email she had sent to my father. The one about making me look unstable. I held it up. This was sent 3 months ago, I said, before I ever confronted anyone. A murmur moved through the room. My mother's face drained. My father leaned forward. I went on. You told everyone I was imagining things. You said I was confused. You said I needed help. I held up another page. This is the message where you discussed how to present me at family gatherings so I would sound unreliable if I spoke up. No one was smiling now. The air had changed. You could feel the tension in every corner of the room. My sister stood abruptly. That's taken out of context. I looked at her. Is it? Then I turned another page. This is the bank transfer showing my name used on an account I never approved. My brother's jaw clenched. This is a text from you, I said, looking at him now. Admitting you took the money and planned to say I offered it as a gift. He said, nothing. I pulled out another printout. And this is your message to Mom, telling her I was too unstable to challenge if we stayed calm and kept repeating the same story. The room was dead silent. My aunt's hand covered her mouth. My cousin stared at the table. A neighbor whispered, Oh my God. I could feel every eye on me. But for the first time in my life, I did not feel small. I felt clear. My mother finally found her voice. Those are private family conversations. I nodded. Yes, they are. She blinked, almost offended that I had agreed with her. Then I said, Private does not mean innocent. That landed harder than anything else. My father stood up. Claire, sit down and stop this right now. I turned to him. No. That one word hit the room like a slap. He had never heard it from me like that. Not in public. Not with an audience. Not without fear behind it. I looked directly at him and continued. For years, you all told people I was the problem. You told them I was unstable, dramatic, difficult, and jealous. You did that because it was easier than admitting what you were doing. My mother snapped, You are twisting everything. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Then I tapped play. The recording came through the speakers loud and clear. My brother's voice. Just keep telling people Claire is emotional. Nobody will trust her word over ours. Then my sister's voice. If she starts asking about the house, say she's spiraling again. Then my mother. She won't fight hard if everyone thinks she's unstable. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds of total silence. It was like the whole room forgot how to breathe. My mother looked like she had been struck. My brother stared at the floor. My sister's face went pale. My father looked between them, then at me. And for the first time, I saw something I had almost never seen in him. Fear. Real fear. Because the performance was over. The mask had fallen, and there was nowhere left to hide. I raised my voice only slightly. Not loud, just enough. I know what you did to me. I know how long you planned it. I know how many people you lied to, and I know exactly why. Nobody moved. I continued. You wanted me to look unstable because if I looked unstable, the girl who thought being quiet would keep the peace. The woman I had become was built from all of that pain. And I hated that it had taken this much to get here. But I was here. Finally here. My phone kept buzzing. I looked at the screen and saw 12 missed calls. Then a text from my mother. You have embarrassed this family. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it hurt me, because it was so predictable. Even now, even after everything, she still could not say, we were wrong. She still could not say, we hurt you. She still could not say, I'm sorry. It was always going to be my fault somehow. I locked the phone and put it face down. Then I drove. I didn't even know where I was going at first. I just knew I could not stay near that house another minute. The roads were nearly empty that night. Street lights passed over my windshield one by one. My mind kept replaying the dinner over and over again. The way my mother's face changed when I held up the emails. The way my brother stopped smirking when I read his text out loud. The way the whole table had gone silent when the recording played. I had spent so many years imagining that moment. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted someone, anyone, to finally see me clearly. And now they had. The problem was, truth does not always feel beautiful when it arrives. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes it feels like shaking hands and a breaking heart. Sometimes it feels like all the years you lost can never come back. I pulled into a gas station near the edge of town and sat there under the bright white lights for a while. People came and went. A man filled his tank. A woman bought coffee. A teenager laughed into his phone. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. Like my life had not just split open. I sat there and opened my phone again. This time, I called my lawyer. She answered on the second ring. Claire? Her voice was calm and steady, and I almost lost it again just hearing someone sound normal. It's done, I said. There was a pause. Then she said, did you show them? Yes. And? I looked out the windshield, and they had nothing. My lawyer exhaled softly. Good. That one word meant more to me than she probably knew. Good. Not complicated. No dramatic. Just good. She told me to come by her office the next morning, and I agreed. When I finally got home, it was nearly midnight. I lived alone in a small apartment across town, and for the first time I was grateful for every plain, quiet inch of it. No family portraits on the wall. No fake smiles in the kitchen. No one waiting behind a closed door to accuse me of something. Just my space. My silence. My own breath. I set the folder on the table and stood there staring at it. It looked smaller now. Weaker somehow. All that power they had tried to hide inside it for years. And now it was just paper. Just proof. Just the truth. I made myself a cup of tea, but I barely drank it. My hands were still trembling, and every few minutes my phone lit up with another call I refused to answer. At one point, I almost turned it off completely, but I didn't. Because somewhere deep inside me, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. And I was ready. The next morning, I woke up tired in a way sleep could not fix. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. I got dressed slowly and went to the lawyer's office with the folder under my arm. By then, the messages had already started spreading through the family. I knew that because my cousin Hannah texted me at 7:14 a.m. I don't know what to believe, but what they said last night doesn't match what I heard in the recording. I stared at the message for a second. Then another came. From my aunt. Call me when you can. Then another. From my uncle. I saw the papers. Claire, I need to understand what happened. That was the first time I realized the truth was moving faster than their lies. Not everyone believed me, but enough people were starting to ask questions. And questions are dangerous to people who have built a life on manipulation. At the lawyer's office, I laid everything out on the table. The emails, the bank statements, the recorded conversations, the property documents, the dates, the signatures. My lawyer reviewed it all with a calm expression that almost made me cry again, because she looked at me like I was a client, not a burden, not a problem, not unstable, just a person with evidence. After an hour, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Claire, this is serious, very serious." I nodded. "I know." She looked at me carefully. "They have been hiding a lot." "Yes. And they thought you wouldn't fight back." I let out a slow breath. They were right about one thing. She waited. "I didn't fight back. Not for a long time." Her expression changed just a little. And then I said, "But I remembered everything." She nodded once. "That matters." It mattered more than anything. Because I had spent years being told my memory was dramatic, my feelings were exaggerated, and my instincts were wrong. But they were not. My instincts had been warning me all along. That day, my lawyer started putting together the legal response. She told me not to contact my family directly anymore. No arguments. No explanations. No chances for them to twist my words. Everything would go through her now. That was hard to accept at first. Part of me still wanted to send one final message. Something simple. Something like, "I told the truth." But I knew better. People who have lied for years do not suddenly become honest because you ask nicely. So I stayed quiet, and that silence this time was not surrender. It was strategy. By the end of the week, the family was in full panic. My mother called from a number I almost didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. Her voice was different now. Not graceful, not confident, just thin and strained. "Claire, this is tearing the family apart. You need to stop this immediately." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because even now, she was still pretending I had started it. No apology, no accountability, just panic that the image was cracking. My brother left a voicemail after that. "Claire, this has gone too far. You're going to ruin everything." That one made me stop and stare at the wall. Ruin everything. That was his biggest fear. Not the lies, not the theft, not the years of emotional damage. Just that the truth might inconvenience him. Then my sister texted me. "Why are you doing this to Mom?" That was the message that made my stomach turn, because it showed me she still did not understand. Or maybe she understood perfectly and just didn't care. I typed a response and erased it 3 times. Finally, I wrote, "I'm not doing anything to her. I'm responding to what she did to me." Then I deleted that too, because I knew there was no point. Instead, I blocked her. One by one, I started blocking the worst of the calls. Not out of anger, out of peace. It felt strange at first, like putting down something heavy I had carried so long I forgot it was there. Days passed, then a week, then another. The family event became the talk of the relatives. People called, people whispered. People who had once laughed at me were suddenly very interested in hearing my side. Some apologized. Some did not. Some said they never knew the full story, which was another way of saying they had ignored the signs. And while I appreciated the ones who reached out kindly, I also learned something important. Healing is not the same as being understood by everyone. Some people will only believe you once they can no longer avoid the facts. And that is not the same as love. During that time, I started sleeping better. Not perfectly, but better. The first few nights were hard. I kept waking up with the old fear in my chest, expecting a call, a confrontation, a new lie. But the lies had lost their power now. Not because they were gone, because I had named them. And once something is named, it becomes harder to hide. About 2 weeks after the dinner, I got a message from my cousin Hannah asking if she could meet me for coffee. I almost said no. Family contact felt dangerous. But Hannah had never been cruel to me. Just quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The kind of person who sees things but waits too long to speak. So I met her at a small cafe near the park. She looked nervous when she sat down. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at her. That was all it took for my throat to tighten. She put both hands around her cup. "I should have said something years ago," she said. "I knew they talked about you differently. I knew they were setting you up in some conversations. I didn't think it was my place." Her eyes filled with tears. I thought maybe I was overreacting. I nodded slowly. That word again. Overreacting. It had been used against me so many times that hearing someone else say it made me feel sick. Hannah reached across the table. I believed them because they sounded sure, and because you were always the quiet one. I looked at her and said very softly, "Quiet does not mean guilty." She started crying then, not loudly, just enough to show she meant it. And for the first time, I saw how many people in that family had been trapped in the same system I had. Not the same pain, not the same level, but the same fear. Fear of speaking, fear of challenging the story, fear of becoming the next target. That did not excuse them, but it helped me understand why the lie had lasted so long. At some point, people choose comfort over courage, and courage is expensive. In the weeks that followed, the legal process kept moving. My lawyer confirmed what I had suspected for a long time. There had been attempts to manipulate documents and control money connected to the house. My father did not admit everything at first. My mother denied. My brother tried to claim misunderstandings. My sister said she had only helped organize things. But the paper trail was there, and paper does not forget. One by one, the story they had built around me began to collapse. Not in a dramatic explosion. In small pieces, the kind of pieces that make liars nervous. A signature here, a message there, a transfer, a date, a recording, a saved file, a quiet truth waiting patiently for the right moment. People always think truth comes crashing in like lightning. Sometimes it does. But sometimes truth is slower, more patient. It waits while people laugh. It waits while people doubt. It waits while people call you unstable. And then one day, in a room full of witnesses, it stands up and says, "Enough." That was what happened to me. And the strange thing was, after the dust started to settle, I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, deeply tired. Because winning against people who were supposed to protect you does not feel like victory at first. It feels like grief with paperwork. Still, there was relief too. Small at first, then stronger. The relief of not having to perform. The relief of not scanning every room for danger. The relief of knowing that if someone called me dramatic now, it would bounce off a much stronger wall. I had proof. I had truth. And, most important, I had myself again. One afternoon, about a month later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, Claire. My hands shook as I opened it. For a moment, I thought it might be another threat. It wasn't. It was from my father. The letter was short. Too short for all the damage he had done. He wrote that he was sorry things had gotten out of hand. Not sorry for the lies. Not sorry for the years of damage. just sorry that things had become public. I stared at that letter for a long time. Then I folded it and put it in the folder with the rest of the evidence. Because even half-truths deserve a place in the record. A few days later, my lawyer called and told me the next legal step was ready. I sat on the edge of my couch and listened to her explain everything. And for the first time, I realized the life I had been fighting for was finally becoming mine. Not because my family approved. Not because they admitted anything. But because I stopped waiting for their permission. That was the real turning point. Not the dinner. Not the folder. Not the recording. The turning point was when I finally understood that I did not need to be chosen by people who had spent years trying to erase me. I could choose myself. So I did. I started making new plans. I updated my locks. I changed accounts. I built boundaries that would have once felt impossible. I even began seeing a therapist. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted support from someone who would not turn my pain into gossip. That mattered too. A lot. Because healing after betrayal is not about pretending it never happened. It is about learning how to live without giving that betrayal the final word. And slowly, I started becoming more than the girl they called unstable. I became calm without being silent. Strong without being loud. Careful without being afraid. And maybe that is the deepest revenge of all. Not ruining the people who hurt you. Outgrowing the version of yourself they tried to trap. Months later, I heard that my family still told a version of the story to some people. Of course they did. That is what liars do. They do not stop lying because they are caught. They change the shape of the lie. But it didn't matter as much anymore. Because the people who mattered had seen the evidence. They had seen my face when I spoke. They had heard the recording. They had watched the truth rise in a room they thought they controlled. And once people see that, they cannot fully go back to pretending. As for me, I stopped checking who believed what. I stopped chasing every rumor. I stopped living like my worth depended on the opinions of people committed to misunderstanding me. And one evening, sitting alone in my apartment with a cup of tea getting cold beside me, I realized something that made me close my eyes and breathe deeply. I was safe. Not perfectly. Not forever. But enough. Safe enough to sleep. Safe enough to think. Safe enough to be quiet without being punished for it. Safe enough to exist without performing for anyone's approval. And that was the life they never wanted me to have. Not because I was weak, because they knew that once I got it, I would never let them take it again. The morning after I decided to stop letting my family define me, everything felt different. Not easier. Different. There is a big difference between those two things. Easier means the pain is gone. Different means the pain is still there, but it no longer owns you. That morning, I woke up before sunrise and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, listening to the silence in my apartment. No phones ringing, no footsteps in the hallway, no sharp voices outside my door, just silence. And for a few seconds, that silence scared me, because I had lived so long inside noise, inside blame, inside confusion that peace almost felt unfamiliar. I kept waiting for the next attack, the next message, the next lie, the next relative calling to ask me to understand both sides. But nothing came. The world had not collapsed. And then I had gotten back up. That was the first truth I had to accept. Not that they had been cruel. Not that they had lied. I had known those things for a long time. The real truth was that I had survived it. I got out of bed, made coffee, and stood by the window while the city slowly came alive below me. Cars moving, people walking dogs, someone dragging a suitcase down the sidewalk, a delivery truck backing up with a beep that echoed through the morning air. Everything outside my window looked ordinary, but inside me, something was rebuilding. Slowly, quietly. The kind of rebuilding nobody claps for. The kind that happens when a person decides they are finished being destroyed. My lawyer called at 8:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was still holding the coffee mug when my phone rang. "Claire," she said, "I've reviewed the additional documents you sent last night." I sat down. "Okay." Her voice was calm, but there was something in it that made me straighten up. "There are patterns here," she said. "Several. This was not just family conflict. Someone has been carefully protecting money movement, property transfers, and false statements." I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, because hearing it from someone else made it real in a way I had not let myself fully accept before. She continued, "I want to be careful with wording, but this is serious enough that we need to prepare for aggressive pushback." I almost laughed. From them? Yes. That one word told me everything. My family was not going to say, "You were right, Claire." They were going to say I was obsessed, vindictive, unstable. They were going to act like the truth was the threat and not the lies. I knew that pattern already. So I said, "Let them." There was a short pause. Then my lawyer said, "That's a new tone." I looked out the window. "It's a tired tone." She understood that immediately. By noon, the messages started again. This time, they were not just coming from my mother and father. They were coming from people I had not expected. An aunt, a distant cousin, an old family friend. Some were angry. Some were confused. Some were trying to sound neutral, which is just a softer way of avoiding the truth. One message said, "Your mother is devastated." Another said, "This could have been handled privately." Another said, "Are you sure you remember everything correctly?" That last one made my jaw tighten. "Are you sure you remember everything correctly?" That was the sentence that had followed me my entire life. And every time someone said it, what they really meant was, "We would rather doubt you than face what this says about us." I didn't reply. Not to any of them. That was new for me, too. Normally, I would have rushed to explain, to defend, to prove, to calm them down. But I had learned something important. People who come to you with a made-up version of reality are not looking for the truth. They are looking for reassurance that they can keep living comfortably inside the lie. I was done giving them that. That afternoon, I met my lawyer again, and this time we went over everything line by line. It was painful, not because the facts were unclear, because the facts were humiliating. There were records of money moved through accounts I had never seen before. There were references to the house, references to signatures, references to conversations where my name was used like a shield, a tool, a convenient excuse. Every page was another reminder that I had not been paranoid. I had been surrounded. My lawyer looked up from the papers and said, "They used your reputation to keep the family structure from collapsing." I swallowed hard. That sounds awful when you say it like that. It is awful. I nodded, because I had no argument. That was the thing about the truth. It can sound cruel even when it is simply accurate. I drove home in silence that evening, and on the way back I passed a family restaurant I used to go to as a child. For a second, I saw myself at 8 years old, the one where my mother had written that they needed me to look unstable if I challenged the house issue. I read it slowly. This time, I noticed something I had missed before. A timestamp. Not just any timestamp. It was sent before they had even confronted me about the problem. That meant they had decided on the story before they had even heard my side. Before they had listened. Before they had cared. I sat down hard in the chair. That was the moment the anger changed shape. For a long time, my anger had been hot. Messe. The kind that burns you from the inside when you keep swallowing it. But now it became cold, clear, focused. The kind of anger that does not explode. It organizes. I started writing everything down in a notebook. Not the evidence itself. The timeline. What happened first? What was said? Who was present? When they started changing the story? When they began to isolate me? When they decided I was the easiest person to sacrifice? It was painful work, but it gave me something I had not had in years. Structure. And structure matters when your life has been turned into confusion. By the next morning, I had a map of everything. Not just one lie. A system. That was the hardest part to accept. I had not been the victim of random family tension. I had been living inside a system of control. A system where one person could be labeled unstable so everyone else could avoid guilt. A system where truth was buried under politeness. A system where people knew enough to stay quiet and too little to help. I sent the timeline to my lawyer. She called me within minutes. "This is extremely useful," she said. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "You sound relieved." "I am. This gives us a clear path for the first time in days." I smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to feel human. Then she said something I did not expect. "Claire, you should prepare yourself. Once this goes beyond the family, it may become ugly in a new way." I leaned back in my chair. Ugly in a new way? Yes. Public denials. Character attacks. Maybe even attempts to make you feel guilty for defending yourself. I looked down at the notebook in my lap. They already did that. Then you know what it feels like. I did. And that was exactly why I wasn't going to let it work anymore. That weekend, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from my mother. She had stopped calling. Now she was trying to sound formal. The email was 3 paragraphs long and filled with phrases like deep concern and family misunderstanding. She wrote that I had taken things out of proportion, that I had become fixated, that my emotional state was causing me to misread harmless conversations. I read every word with a strange kind of calm. She was still doing it, still trying to turn the truth into a symptom, still trying to put me back in the same box, still trying to speak over the facts. At the bottom of the email, she wrote, "Please think carefully before making permanent decisions based on temporary hurt." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Temporary hurt. That was what she thought this was. A mood. A phase. A dramatic response to a family disagreement. Not years of humiliation. Not manipulation. Not theft. Not being told over and over that my reality was broken until I started doubting it myself. I forwarded the email to my lawyer and then deleted it. Not because I was weak. Because I no longer needed to keep rereading what I already knew. That night, I got another call. This time from my cousin Hannah. She sounded nervous. "Claire," she said, "I need to tell you something." I sat up immediately. "What is it?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Your father told the family that you're threatening legal action because you want revenge." I closed my eyes. "Of course he did," Hannah continued. "But that's not what people are saying anymore. A lot of them are questioning why he sounded so defensive at the dinner." I stayed silent. She said. They replayed the recording. My grip tightened around the phone. "You what?" Some of the cousins shared it privately. Not to be cruel, just because it was too much to ignore. I let out a breath. Too much to ignore. That phrase meant more than she probably knew, because that was exactly how truth works once it gets out. It spreads through the cracks. It finds the people who were too afraid to ask. It forces the room to listen. Hannah's voice softened. "I should have believed you sooner." I looked at the floor. That was another kind of pain. The pain of hearing an apology that cannot undo the damage, but still matters because it finally names it. "I know," I said quietly. She was crying now. So was I. But not in the same way as before. This time, the tears were not for confusion. They were for release, for recognition, for the girl I